In a courtroom where expectations were set low and doubts ran high, 17-year-old Alana Grant stood alone, an unlikely defendant. Mocked by the judge, underestimated by the prosecutor, and laughed at by the people in the gallery, no one in that room could have predicted what would happen next. The case against her seemed clear: theft, assault, and damning video evidence. But Alana wasn't just fighting criminal charges, she was fighting a system that had already decided her fate. What they didn't know was that Alana wasn't just a teenage girl, she was a genius attorney in disguise. With unmatched confidence and razor-sharp intellect, she tore apart the prosecution's so-called evidence, revealing lies, deceit, and an entire conspiracy to silence her. The courtroom fell into stunned silence as she turned the tables, forcing the judge to re-evaluate everything. When the verdict came down in her favor, not guilty, it was more than just a win. It was a declaration that the fight for justice doesn't belong to the powerful. It belongs to anyone who dares to challenge the truth. But the story didn't end there. Alana knew she was up against something bigger than a courtroom. Someone wanted to silence her, and they wouldn't stop until they did. What happens next? Well, you'll have to stay tuned to Chronicles of Black Resilience for details. Are you inspired by Alana's courage and unwavering fight for justice? Do you believe one person can truly challenge the system? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. We want to hear your take on this story. Hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to watch it, and don't forget to subscribe to Chronicles of Black Resilience for more powerful table-turning stories. This journey is far from over. Join us because the truth is just getting started. The air was thick with anticipation, heavy enough to feel like a blanket on the shoulders of everyone inside the courtroom. The low hum of murmurs filled the space, bouncing off the cold marble walls as the gallery settled into place. Rows of spectators sat, some bored, others anxious, and a few simply curious about what was going to unfold in this unremarkable criminal court. No one, however, anticipated the storm that was about to hit. Judge Michael Harris, the kind of man who had seen it all, was lounging in his chair, one hand drumming absently on the polished wood of his desk, his eyes half-lidded behind thick glasses. He looked down at the defendant, a teenage girl no older than 17, standing alone, awkwardly at the defendant's table. Her name was Alana Grant, and by all appearances she was out of place. She wore a simple denim jacket and scuffed sneakers, her long dark braids falling over her shoulders. Her hands were tucked casually in her pockets, and she held her chin just high enough to convey a quiet strength, one that no one in the courtroom seemed to notice. Alana's eyes flickered up to meet the judge's, unblinking, like she had already seen this moment in her mind 1,000 times before. She wasn't nervous, wasn't shaking like most people her age would be if they were about to face criminal charges. Instead, she had an unsettling calmness about her, as though she knew exactly what was going to happen next. Alana Grant, Judge Harris's voice echoed in the cavernous space, oozing sarcasm. Charged with theft and assault. A typical case of a troubled teenager trying to make a name for herself. The courtroom snickered, and Alana felt the heat of their judgment, but her expression remained unchanged. She didn't flinch. She had been here before, not physically but in her mind. Her mother, Denise, a defense attorney who had been in and out of courtrooms for years, had taught her everything. She had spent her childhood watching her mother fight tooth and nail for justice, often to little avail. But Alana had learned something crucial in those moments. Sometimes justice wasn't in the law, it was in the fight. And today Alana was ready to fight. The judge glanced at the prosecutor, a smug man named Peter Rollins. "Let's get this over with," Harris muttered. "I have a golf game in an hour, and I'm sure we're all eager to get on with our lives." Rollins stood up, his tailored suit perfect, his posture impeccable. "Your Honor, we have clear evidence that the defendant, Alana Grant, was caught in the act of stealing from a local retail store. Not only did she take expensive clothing and electronics, but when confronted by security she became violent and attempted to flee. Her fingerprints were found on the stolen merchandise, and we have the surveillance footage to prove it." Alana could feel the eyes of the gallery on her, but she didn't look around. She focused on the prosecutor's voice. His rehearsed confidence was almost palpable. He was so sure of himself, but Alana knew something he didn't. She knew he was making a fatal mistake. "Your Honor," Rollins continued, "I'll now submit into evidence the security footage as well as the physical evidence of the stolen items." The judge nodded, flipping through his papers. He barely glanced at Alana before turning his attention back to the prosecutor. "Proceed," Harris said, tapping his gavel lightly. The room fell into silence as Rollins began his presentation. The footage flashed on the screen showing Alana in the store, her movements quick but deliberate. She was seen picking up a designer handbag, slipping it into her bag with practiced ease. The camera angle shifted, showing her exiting the store, eyes darting nervously as the alarm went off. The image was clear, damning even. But Alana wasn't moved. The footage only showed one side of the story, the side the prosecutor wanted everyone to believe. She knew the truth. And the truth wasn't in that footage. Judge Harris leaned back in his chair, eyes narrowing behind his glasses as he scanned the room. Well, it seems like a pretty straightforward case, doesn't it? His voice was filled with dry amusement. The defendant's fingerprints, the stolen merchandise, the escape attempt, it's all there. No need for much of a defense, I'd say. The crowd murmured, exchanging glances, but Alana stood still, her expression unwavering. I'll remind everyone, Judge Harris continued, this isn't a debate club. It's a courtroom. Let's keep it moving. Rollins smirked, sensing an easy victory. But before he could say another word, Alana spoke up, her voice calm and clear. Your Honor, she said, her gaze locking with Judge Harris's. I'd like to represent myself. The room went silent. The judge's face twitched slightly, disbelief flickering in his eyes. Excuse me? I said I'll be defending myself, Alana repeated, her tone unwavering. Laughter rippled through the courtroom, and even the prosecutor couldn't suppress his amusement. A teenager, barely out of high school, about to take on a seasoned prosecutor in a criminal case? It was ludicrous. Judge Harris chuckled darkly. Oh, this should be good. A high schooler thinks she can defend herself in a court of law? This ought to be fun. Alana didn't flinch. She wasn't there to entertain anyone. She was there for one reason only, to expose the cracks in the system, the ones everyone else ignored. Rollins raised an eyebrow, his smirk widening. Your Honor, are we really going to entertain this? This girl is a defendant, not a lawyer. She has no business representing herself. Alana's eyes flickered with a glint of defiance. I think I do, she replied, her voice steady, but the words cut through the room like a blade. And if it's all right with the court, I'd like to start by questioning the validity of your so-called evidence. The tension in the room shifted, becoming palpable as every eye in the gallery was on her. Judge Harris looked at her, his smile slowly fading, replaced by curiosity. He hadn't expected this. No one had. Very well, the judge said, leaning forward. Let's hear it then. What's your argument? Alana took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. The footage, she began, is incomplete. It doesn't show the entire event. It's been edited. You see, Your Honor, the footage conveniently cuts off right before I allegedly left the store. What we don't see is me walking out the door, because that's exactly what I did. I didn't steal anything. The murmurs in the gallery grew louder. The prosecutor's expression faltered just for a moment before he recovered. That's a ridiculous claim, Rollins scoffed. The footage is clear. Alana raised her hand, signaling for the judge's attention. I'd like to request the full, unedited footage, she said, her voice cutting through the chaos. And I'd like to submit a formal request to verify the timestamps on it. I have a feeling it's not going to match up. The judge glanced at Rollins, his brow furrowed. Do you have any objections to verifying the footage, counselor? Rollins hesitated. The room fell into a tense silence as the seconds dragged on. He was supposed to be the one with all the answers, the one who had everything figured out. But Alana's words were starting to make him sweat. Well? Judge Harris prompted. No objections, Your Honor, Rollins finally muttered, though his voice lacked its previous confidence. Alana's lips curled into the faintest of smirks. She had just taken the first step in dismantling the case. But she wasn't done yet. Now, let's talk about the fingerprint evidence, Alana said, stepping forward. You're telling the jury that my fingerprints on the merchandise mean I stole it. But let's think about that for a second. Just because my fingerprints were on the items doesn't make me guilty. She paused, letting the words settle in the air. I could have touched those items anywhere, while I was shopping, even while browsing the store's aisles. That doesn't mean I took them. The crowd went silent. The prosecutor was visibly sweating now, flipping through his notes in a panic. But here's the catch, Alana continued, her voice low and measured. What you don't know, what you didn't bother to check, is that I wasn't even in the store at the time of the alleged theft. The courtroom erupted in disbelief. People whispered to each other, glancing back at the prosecutor, who looked like he was about to lose his composure entirely. Let me guess, Alana continued, you didn't bother to ask for an alibi, did you? You didn't care to look into the store's security logs or even check where I was at the time. You just assumed I was guilty. Judge Harris sat up straighter, his eyes narrowing in on the prosecutor. Is this true, counselor? Rollins opened his mouth to speak, but nothing came out. Alana had him cornered and he knew it. Your Honor, Alana said, I was at a different store across the street with my friends. I have witnesses who can attest to that. The judge looked at Rollins, his expression serious now. Can you refute that claim, Mr. Rollins? Rollins was speechless. Alana took a step back, her confidence growing. She wasn't the defendant anymore, she was in control of this courtroom. And then, with one final devastating move, Alana pulled out a piece of paper. I'd also like to submit an official statement from the store owner, she said. It says, and I quote, the girl who took the items wasn't black. She was white. The room went dead silent. A statement like that was a bombshell, one that no one had seen coming. Your Honor, Alana continued, her voice sharp and unyielding, the man who allegedly witnessed me in the store isn't even the one who made the arrest. The police just assumed I was guilty because I matched the description of the suspect. But I'm not the thief. The gasps in the courtroom were deafening. People whispered to one another in disbelief. Even the judge looked stunned. Judge Harris cleared his throat, but it was clear that the room was no longer on his side. I think, he began slowly, we may need to take a break and review all of this. As the courtroom erupted in murmurs and the bailiff called for a recess, Alana stood tall. She had just shaken the foundation of this entire case, and it was only just beginning. But as Alana left the courtroom, she knew something deeper was at play. Someone was trying to silence her, and they wouldn't stop until they did. The real question was, who? If this story made you think, if you're ready for the next chapter, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to Chronicles of Black Resilience. You won't want to miss what happens next. The break had felt like an eternity. Alana paced outside the courtroom, her mind racing. She had just done what no one had expected. She had shaken the very foundation of the prosecution's case, and now it was time to wait. She could feel the tension in the air, the kind that gnawed at you, making it hard to breathe. She knew she had the truth on her side, but would the jury see it? Would they believe her? When the courtroom doors finally swung open, the hushed murmur of the crowd seemed louder than ever. Everyone returned to their seats, the heavy silence hanging in the air. Alana's heart beat a little faster now, but her composure never wavered. She was ready. Judge Harris entered, his gavel striking with an authoritative bang. The court will reconvene, he announced, his voice firm but tinged with something unexpected, respect. He glanced at Alana for a brief moment before turning his attention to the prosecutor, who seemed notably less confident now. Rollins stood, his face pale, his earlier arrogance nowhere to be found. He had been blindsided. Alana had done what no one had imagined a teenager capable of doing. She had exposed the cracks in the case with precision. She had made him question everything he had assumed about her. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the judge began, his tone different from before. We have reviewed the evidence presented, and I must say, I'm impressed by the thoroughness of the defense. Despite the circumstances, Miss Grant has certainly brought attention to several important inconsistencies. Alana's eyes stayed focused, unwavering. She could feel the jury's gaze on her, but it didn't matter. She knew she had done the right thing. She had fought for herself, and for the truth. Now, Judge Harris continued, his voice softening, after careful consideration, it is clear that there is reasonable doubt regarding the prosecution's case. The evidence, though compelling, does not conclusively prove that Miss Grant is guilty of theft or assault. Therefore, I hereby declare Miss Alana Grant not guilty of all charges. The room went still. Then, like a wave crashing on the shore, the applause erupted from the gallery. The tension in the room melted away, replaced by an almost electric energy. Alana stood tall, her heart swelling with a mix of relief and vindication. She had won. As the gavel struck again, signaling the end of the trial, Alana could hardly believe it. She hadn't just beaten the charges. She hadn't just beaten the charges. She had turned the tables on an entire system that had tried to silence her. She had done it alone. She had done it with nothing but the truth. Outside the courthouse, some minutes later, reporters swarmed the steps of the courthouse. Cameras flashed, microphones were shoved in her face, and reporters shouted questions. The world was finally paying attention. Alana Grant, the teenage defendant who had taken on the legal system and won, was now a hero. She had proven that age and appearance didn't define one's ability to fight for justice. A reporter caught her eye. Miss Grant, how does it feel to have the truth on your side? Alana smiled, the weight of everything she had been through lifting off her shoulders. It feels like justice, she said simply. Sometimes it's not about the system, it's about fighting for what's right even when no one believes you. I've learned that the truth doesn't need anyone's permission to shine. Another reporter raised his microphone. What would you say to anyone who doubts your ability to defend yourself in court? I'd say, Alana began, her voice steady, that everyone has the power to fight for themselves. It's not about whether you're an attorney or a defendant, it's about the fight for what's right. Anyone can do it if they believe in themselves. As Alana walked away from the courthouse, her heart pounding, she knew this was just the beginning. The truth had set her free, but it had also opened a door to something bigger. She had proven that even a teenage girl, underestimated by the system, could change the course of justice. But there was something else she knew now. Someone somewhere was still watching. They had tried to silence her once. But Alana was just getting started. And she would stop at nothing to expose the hidden truths that others were too afraid to touch. What do you think of Alana's incredible journey? Do you believe in the power of one person to challenge the system and change the course of justice? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you're inspired by her courage and resilience, make sure to like, share, and subscribe to Chronicles of Black Resilience for more powerful stories that challenge the status quo. This is just one chapter in the fight for justice, and trust me, you won't want to miss what happens next.